Leaked emails and chats, resignations, and editorial battles. BBC News is facing internal turmoil over its pro-Israeli coverage of Tel Aviv's genocidal war on Palestine's Gaza. Touting itself as the world's most trusted broadcaster, the news channel is facing a plethora of accusations by its own staff, including bias, censorship, creating false equivalence between the perpetrators and the victims, and downplaying Palestinian suffering while glossing over Israeli atrocities. An in-depth investigation by Dropsite News uncovered internal emails, testimonies, leaked documents, and screenshots of chats that shed light on the channel's biased coverage of the ongoing Israeli war on Palestinians. But how did it come to this? In November 2023, BBC News senior management joined a morning editorial meeting with over 100 staffers to discuss Gaza coverage. The tone was set early when Deborah Turness, the CEO of the network, said, "We've got to all remember that this all started on 7 October. What followed was a fiery debate, with staff pushing back against what they saw as an oversimplification of the conflict that ignored the broader historical context of Israeli occupation and the suffering it had caused in Gaza." Shortly thereafter, over 100 BBC employees signed a letter condemning the network for biased reporting on Gaza and failing to meet its own editorial standards. Their demands: acknowledge that Israel was denying journalists access to Gaza, stop treating official Israeli statements as gospel, and provide critical context on Gaza's residents, most of whom are refugees whose families were forcibly displaced from other parts of Palestine in 1948. For many, the letter was a last resort, as their previous attempts to engage management had been completely ignored. Turness dismissed the concerns, however, claiming the network reports without fear or favour. But staff saw this as BBC News dodging the real issue by reframing their concerns as identity politics. "This isn't about identity," one journalist fired back. "It's about refusing to blindly accept the Israeli narrative." The internal rift deepened in December 2023 when BBC News buried Amnesty International's report accusing Israel of genocide, and instead published a pro-Israeli stand on the topic that led with "Israel rejects fabricated claims of genocide." Internally, staff called it a PR win for Israel, sparking further frustration. Much of the blame is directed at Rafi Berg, BBC News Online's Middle East editor. Berg has been accused of micromanaging coverage, watering down critical stories about Israel, and fostering what staff describe as a culture of systematic Israeli propaganda. Berg's critics point to his personal history to underline their concerns. While junior staff were reprimanded for social media posts supporting Palestine, Berg publicly celebrated the launch of his book on Israel's Mossad with an event attended by an Israeli embassy spokesperson. On more than one occasion, he posted on social media that he had seen his book on Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu's bookshelf, expressing delight at his prominence. BBC journalists argue that this background is key to understanding Berg's influence upon and shaping of BBC News Gaza coverage, from headlines to story text to images, arguing that he repeatedly seeks to put Israel's army front and center while stripping Palestinians of their humanity. Internal turmoil across all BBC News channels has been boiling since the start of Israel's genocidal war on the Palestinian enclave. On October 24, 2023, 2 weeks into Israel's bombardment of Gaza, BBC Arabic correspondent Rami Rouhaim accused the network of double standards. He noted that terms like massacre were freely used to describe Hamas, but were rarely applied to Israeli actions. He also called out the omission of key contexts like Israel's apartheid and historical ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. By November 2023, 8 more BBC journalists joined Rouhaim's critique, accusing the news channel of ignoring genocidal Israeli calls for a total blockade on Gaza and its use of dehumanizing language towards Palestinians. Management responded not by taking accountability, but rather by framing these concerns as mental health issues, offering staff support groups instead of addressing editorial malpractice. In March 2024, the Center for Media Monitoring added to the backlash, releasing a 150-page report accusing BBC News of stripping its Gaza coverage of the vital context of Israel's long-standing occupation and 16-year siege of the enclave, and using emotive language to describe Israeli suffering while ignoring the suffering of Palestinians and casting doubt on pro-Palestinian voices. BBC's Director of News Content, Richard Burgess, dismissed the findings outright, claiming he didn't recognise the bias, further deepening mistrust among wary BBC News staff. With its credibility taking a huge blow and mounting evidence of compromised impartiality, and yet no sign of accountability, the question many now are asking is, can BBC News actually be trusted?